Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in this time-lapse style tutorial video of me drawing a hyperrealistic eye. If you'd like to draw along, there's a link in the description to the reference image I used, and so you can actually print it out like I did or view it on your own device. So firstly, materials you're going to need and tools. Obviously, paper will be a good start. I'm using this Canson Bristol board as it is quite thick but also very smooth. The roughness of the paper will vary your results really, so just use the best quality you can. Next, your pencils that you're going to need. I mean, you're going to need at least one pencil, because how are you going to draw without at least one pencil, right? I'm actually using 3 grades or softnesses of pencil. I'm using a 2B, a 4B and a 5B. You can really just use one pencil if you like, but I'd recommend at least just using at least a 2B, as they are sort of the most versatile in terms of shading. Next, at some point you're going to want to erase your pencil marks, so you'll have to get yourself an eraser. I'd recommend a kneadable eraser, as they are very versatile and also you can get some precise detail with them. I'd also suggest a fine eraser such as this Tombow Mono Zero. They're really great for fine highlights and also they're refillable. Finally, you're going to need to blend your shading out, so something like a blending stump is ideal for this. You can also use tissue paper, cotton wool, earbuds or a dry paint or makeup brush. So as we get started with the drawing, what I'm going to do first is just get the actual rough size of the eye. I'm using really light pressure. I'm actually using the pencil to measure the size of the eye from the reference drawing. Don't be afraid to use your pencil for that. You know, it's not just for drawing, it's actually for measuring as well. So I'm just basically positioning rough guidelines, rough lines just to refine later. Here I'm actually putting in the eye, the iris and the pupil and just positioning them in between the eyelids. I'm just erasing my construction lines there just so it makes things clearer, putting a little bit of shadow and a little bit of indication of eyelashes underneath on the bottom eyelid, putting a little bit of shading in the tear duct and the white of the eye. The whites of the eyes don't tend to be white per se, but they're more of a very light grey colour. So yeah, I'm just there using blending stump to blend out those tones just to give some nice even finish. Those are going to define sort of the base tones, I suppose. In doing this sort of drawing, it's important to get an understanding of the difference between the darkest tones in the drawing and the lightest tones and where each tone lies. That's probably one of the more important things for doing something like this, you know, hyperrealism. It's getting that you know, that distinction in between what is your lightest colours or what is your lightest tones and what is your darkest tones. So as you can see here, I'm just roughly drawing in what, yeah, I think it's a reflection. I think when the photo was taken, it was taken in front of quite a bright window, so you can obviously see the reflection of the window in the sort of glossiness of the eye. And there I'm just putting in some shading for the iris and defining the darkness of the pupil as well. I tend to do it this way because it gives you a good base to sort of base, like a base tone if you will. You know, that's the darkest part in the drawing, so then you can base everything else, all the other tones off that dark, you know, that dark part of the image if you will. You can sort of judge what the other tones are like. Here you can see I'm just using my kneadable eraser to just take out a little bit of graphite and just to help it all sort of blend together nicely. Using the blending stump again just to smooth out the tones. Really all we're doing here is we're just slowly building up layers of graphite, because what you don't want to do is go in heavy straight away because you won't be able to erase it. So what you do instead is you build up the layers of graphite slowly. It does take time, but it gets the best results really. So as you can see, I'm just putting a little bit of a suggestion of texture into the iris. On this, well, if you look at an iris closely, it's got a bit of a strange texture. It's almost like sort of flakes of the iris are inside the eye, and you get these lovely shadows and sort of striations. I think that's the word, striations. So yeah, I'm just putting in a little bit of a suggestion of that. And going in there and just darkening up that tear duct area. It's quite sort of a dark area if you look on the reference photo. So I'm just going in there with a darker pencil. I think that's a 4B. And just starting to darken up certain areas. And this is where the drawing really starts popping out, really, because this is where you start defining where the really darker areas are on the drawing, and that ultimately gives the whole drawing a very three-dimensional look, and a sort of look that the drawing's got depth to it, if you will. So yeah, I'm just going around these little glossy areas around the tear duct here, just alternating between sort of a dark pencil and the blending stump just to blend it in nicely. Here you can see I am going back in and just detailing a little bit more of the iris, and darkening up those areas I was talking about before. And this is really going to give the drawing a lot of depth and a lot of sort of like a suggestion of three-dimensionality. It's very easy to, when you're using blending stumps, to make the drawing look very flat, and the reason that happens is because you have sort of blended out all the midtones basically, and there's just sort of no definition of shape. However, when you're actually doing something like this, something that's in the realms of hyperrealism, if you notice the edges and lines, there's no actual hard lines, they're very blended together, which is why I am going there over sort of the hard lines around the eye and just sort of blending out that dark line just to give a sort of feel of, you know, a bit of shadow underneath the eyelid. So yeah, we're going in with a 5B pencil. This is, as you can see, it's tiny because I've used it that much. I will actually put an extender on it eventually, just because it gets a little bit too difficult to hold so far close to the end there. So yeah, I'm just going in with a 5B pencil, darkening up some areas, adding some more layers of graphite, and sort of taking out little highlight bits with my erasers, with both my kneadable eraser and that little fine eraser. And at this stage, it's really good because you've built up so much graphite on your blending stump, you can actually use your blending stump as a pencil, really, and you can get some really nice, even light tones, just with the graphite that's already on the blending stumps. So as you can see, I've just shaded in the upper eyelid, and I am currently detailing the eyelashes, I suppose. In the reference photo, if you have a look on the reference photo, you can see that the eyelashes are slightly blurred in some areas. The blending stump's brilliant for that because you can put in just an amount of graphite that you need and blend over it, and it gives it a really nice blurred out look. So you're not having to draw each individual eyelash, which can make the drawing look very flat as well. So again, I'm going through now, detailing the iris again, just putting a little bit more dark detail in and showing those sort of the fibres of the iris. As I said, it's got a very strange sort of texture to it. It's like I said, it's almost like layers or something. I don't know how to describe it, but it's it gives a really interesting effect. There's lots of shadows and dark parts in the eye, and as I said, that's what gives it so much depth. So you can see I'm just refining that detail around there. You could actually use a mechanical pencil for this. I think I used a little bit of mechanical pencil in this. It isn't sort of necessary, but you do get a lot more finer lines with mechanical pencil. They stay sharper longer, so you don't have to constantly sharpen your pencils. If you do need to sharpen your pencils at all, I use an electronic one, but I mean, as long as the graphite lead is actually fairly sharp, and you keep it fairly sharp, especially when you're doing your details, that's all that matters really. It's the sharper the pencil, the better. And you can even sort of put in really dark details with 2B, using just by doing that, by making sure it's always kept sharp. So you can see here, I'm just putting a little bit more shading and shape into the upper eyelid. If you think of the eye as a sphere, as the sort of sphere pushes the eyelids out, they kind of bulge. So you've got to really just think about shapes a lot of the time when you, at least when you're doing the, you know, the preliminary sort of first sketches, you know, your rough sketch and whatnot. So here you can see I'm just now starting working on the bottom eyelid, just putting a little bit more dark graphite, or I'm not sure, I think that might be a 4B that I'm using. Blending in with the 4B pencil the darker areas of the eye, of the white of the eye. As I said before, they're not entirely white. They are pretty much a shade of grey. It's just picking the right shade to shade them in and blend them in with the blending stump as I'm doing here. I'm just sort of getting some shadows in there underneath the eyelashes, and then putting a little bit more detail with the darker graphite, blending that out with blending stump. And also the eyeball, the white of the eye has got a little bit of a sort of stippled effect to it. So you'll find that in between sort of the darkest part and the lightest part, sort of where the middle tone of the eyeball is, the white part, there's kind of these sort of white highlights, which the kneadable eraser is brilliant for doing that, because you can just make a little point with the kneadable eraser and dab a little bit of graphite out. So as you can see now, I've put my tiny little pencil in a holder just so I can, it's a bit more comfortable to use, and I'm now just putting in final detail for the iris, sort of darkening up those shapes and those lovely textures that are in the iris. And again, the more darker lines I put on that particular section of the eye, on the iris, the more sort of fibrous it looks, which it really does give that effect that you're looking for in the iris. So now I'm just shading in that bottom section of the eye, that bottom eyelid, that I roughed in near the beginning of the drawing. I wasn't quite happy with the upper eyelashes though. As you can see, I'm just going back in there and putting a little bit more detail in. I do tend to work a little bit like this. I tend to flit around and until I'm entirely happy with a particular section. I might go and start darkening up another section, or but it's nice to do that, just to be able to take your mind away from one particular area and let yourself regroup, if you will. So yeah, I'm just putting a little bit of shade in that upper eyelid again, taking a few highlights out, blending the whole area up, putting a little bit of highlight detail in here and there, darkening up a few areas. The key to it really is just building up the layers. As I said, you get a lot more depth out of it that way. If you start with the lighter tones and then build up the layers, and put just shapes in, I suppose, and darken those shapes up, you'll find that the drawing starts popping out at you, and you're getting more towards the effect that you want. So as you can see now, I'm just putting a little bit more shape into that bottom eyelid now, using that's my 5B pencil, and you can see I'm just starting putting in the eyelashes on the bottom eyelid. There's not many on the bottom eyelid, there's not as many as on the top eyelid, but there is still a few, just put a few little suggestions of them there. And again, the blending stump's ideal for that, because if you can see on the reference photo, there is areas of the bottom eyelid, especially the eyelashes on the bottom eyelid, that are quite blurred. So again, just use the blending stump to blend out the little sort of sections of shading that you put in, and that'll give a suggestion that there is an eyelash there, but it's a little bit blurred by something or other, by the camera, or so yeah, just putting in a suggestion of eyelashes really. Your brain will make up a lot of that, your brain does tend to want to fill in details, so if you just put a suggestion of detail in there, the brain will do the rest. And with the midtones especially, it's really good for doing that, because if you just use your eraser to take out little highlights, it gives a suggestion of skin texture. So that's the drawing complete. It isn't exactly like the reference image, but it's close enough. I'd be really interested to see how you guys did with this eye study. Tag me in your photos. My Facebook and Instagram pages can both be found in the video description. Any photos you tag me in, I will at some point critique in a separate video, so here's your chance to show the world what you created. Also guys, hit that subscribe button, as I'll be creating more videos like this in the not so distant future. So if you like this video, and at least got one piece of advice from it that you didn't know before, hit that like button so YouTube can show this video to more people. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll hope to see you soon.